Hello, classes. It's Mr. Maloney back here with day 3 of the World War II PowerPoint. Just wanted to let you know that we just ended the other day with the United States entering the war. So that was a big deal with the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor. And now the United States is involved in the war. So we have allies versus the Axis powers. So we've now got a really big war on our hands. It's a war of epic proportions. You have the United States, you have the United Kingdom, you have the Soviet Union, you have uh, France, you have Canada, Australia, China. Those are all on the Allied side. On the Axis power side, you're going to have the Nazi Germany, you're going to have Japan, and you're going to have Italy. And here's some maps of some of the battles and wars that you see here on the Eastern Front. Another map here showing Southwest Russia here when we had the German offensive in 1942, which we're going to talk about now. So the Battle of Stalingrad, 1942-1943. Germany declared war on the Soviet Union and invaded the Soviet Union. They decided to go to Stalingrad and try to get them for their oil. This is the bloodiest battle in world history. Over 850,000 Nazi troops were killed in this battle. Over 1.2 million Russian soldiers were killed during this battle. So that puts it over 2 million for sure were killed, and we don't even, and statistics back then were not that great. Probably even more than that died. So the Soviet Union was invaded by the Nazi German 6th Army Division, and the Red Army of the Soviets were fighting in what was a really crazy, bloody battle in Stalingrad. And the Nazis used the Luftwaffe to bomb Stalingrad into rubble. Like all the buildings were knocked down. Joseph Stalin, the leader, did not allow the Soviets living in Stalingrad to leave the city. He wanted them to stay in there to help fight and dig trenches and help the soldiers out. So they stayed in there, and eventually that led to more civilian deaths as the Nazis went through the city and the bombings of the Germans continued through the city. Eventually, though, Joseph Stalin was able to call on troops from everywhere in the Soviet Union, from Siberia, from everywhere, even though it took a while for them to get there because the Nazis had bombed all different parts of the Soviet Union and stopped them from being able to get there fast. They were able to eventually get there. They were able to circle the Nazis, and they were able to drive the Nazis out of the Soviet Union and advance into Germany. So this is going to be a turning point in the war. At this point in the war, the Nazis had never even lost a single battle. So this was a big deal that they had lost this battle here in Germany. The Soviets were on their home ground. The Nazis were running out of supplies as they got encircled. They were freezing. A lot of mistakes that were made by the Nazis here led to them eventually losing the war here. This was a huge mistake by Hitler and his people. So the first time that the Soviets go, or that the Nazis go down, is at this point in World War II. Here are some pictures of the Battle of Stalingrad, showing the city basically to rubble here. See all these giant buildings that were exploded. And you're basically in a building to building, house to house type of fighting in this type of battle here in World War II. This shows the movement of Soviet troops in southwest Russia during the Soviet winter offensive here, if you want to look closely at the map on your PowerPoint. and Stalingrad is circled in there. Another famous and great battle during World War II is the Battle of El Alamein in 1942, otherwise known as Operation Torch. This is where famous Nazi tank operator slash commander Erwin the Desert Fox Rommel comes into play. He's a great leader of the Italian troops for the most part, and some German troops who were helping fight in Africa. Um, and also, Operation Torch in other parts like Casablanca and Morocco is where you're going to see General Patton from the United States for the first time. But this was a big deal in Africa at El Alamein. This is where the uh, the coalition of Axis forces are eventually defeated here in Africa, and it slows down their invading forces as they're trying to invade throughout the world. Another great battle here, Operation Avalanche, was the Allied invasion of Italy. Once the Allies were able to take Africa, they were able to use Africa as a launch pad to go into Italy, and attack. And you had you had fortified areas there that were heavily fortified by the Germans, and the Germans would go into these places and hide and fight back. So you had Nazi troops that were fighting very strong, and there was a lot of death in the invasion of Italy here, otherwise known as Operation Avalanche. So, due to the victory in northern Africa, the Allies could invade Europe and go through Italy. And this is going to be a big turning point. So now, if we try to connect the dots a little bit here, you know that the Soviets had won in Stalingrad and were pushing into Germany. And now that in the invasion of Italy, that the Germans and the Italians lost, that ground is going to be vulnerable from attack from the south. So attack from the west, attack from the east and south is now available for the Allies. And now the Allies are ready for the greatest land and sea invasion in world history, the invasion of Normandy in 1944. This is the major turning point in the war. This is called Operation Overlord, otherwise nicknamed D-Day. This is where the Allied forces are going to attack northern France on the English Channel. The Allied forces are going to break through German defenses, advance to Paris, then into Germany, and basically knocking the Nazis out of the war. So, first things first, they're going to try to get France back from Nazi takeover here. So, the Nazis had taken over France, and now they're trying to get in there and get France back, and then ultimately push into Germany and knock the Nazis out of World War II and bring the world back into normalcy. So, here is a picture of the troops landing on the beaches of Omaha. If you saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, in that first 30-minute scene, this is where there's a lot of death. Um, the English Channel is filled with blood, as you can see in this picture right. If you're looking at the high ground of machine guns, would be there pulverizing a lot of these men as they're trying to reach the beach and hopefully be able to take out the machine gunners so that they can advance into France here. Here is a map. If you can see, like in England, there, the map of where the people came from the English. They assembled in the middle of the English Channel, and you could see where the U.S. Army and the British Army and even some Canadian forces went. Some of these beaches were heavily fortified, while others were not as fortified. To be honest, Adolf Hitler thought that the attack would be farther north. He thought that the invasion here was a ploy or a gimmick that they were trying to get them to move their troops so that they would attack from the north. It was also pivotal too because Hitler was not able to be reached in the first few hours of the attack. So the guidance was not there from their military leader and the chancellor of Germany. So Hitler could not give them the feedback they needed to continue to attack here. And this really helped out the Allied forces. Here's some more pictures of troops taking cover on Normandy Beach. True heroes, these people who fought in World War II are known as the greatest generation. Very important. Uh, Unfortunately, this war is so old now. These people are so old that most of them are actually passing away now. So the greatest generation is in their 90s or nearing 100 years old. The people who fought in this war. Here is an Allied cemetery at Normandy of all the heroes who died trying to save the freedoms and save the people from living in a fascist Nazi world. On to slide 58 here, the Battle of the Bulge. This was Germany's last-ditch effort, which failed. At this point, the best troops of Nazi Germany had either been overtaken, had been captured, or killed. So now they're to the point where civilians, even kids from the youth groups, the youth Nazi groups, were called on to fight in this last battle. Um, and fortunately for the Allies, this failed for uh, the Germans, and this was a big victory for the Allied forces as they move now into Germany. So now you have Allied forces moving in from France into Germany, and you have Russian forces, Soviet forces moving in from the other side. So Germany is being attacked from several points. And it's only a matter of time now before they will have to give up. At the same point here in time, the United States was in a two-fronted war. After the United States was attacked by the Japanese, the United States was in a fight not only with their allies in Europe, but they were also having to fight off the Japanese in the Pacific. So the U.S. is fighting the amazing Japanese army in the Pacific. In the Pacific, and the type of fighting that was done in the Pacific is called island hopping. So the United States went and they took Philippines back. They went and fought on Midway, and they took that back. Some of you were able to go see the movie Midway this year. If you did not, a great movie to watch, Midway. Um, Gives you some great insight into what it would have been like to be in that battle, in the Battle of Midway. Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, and Okinawa were other major battles where the Allied forces, basically the Americans, had to go take over the Japanese. Now, the Japanese were no easy people to fight. It is not it's not part of the Japanese culture for them to give up easily. So they don't believe in surrendering. So they will fight till the finish and fight till the death. So they do not surrender. So if there's only even one man on that island, he'll fight one against 500. He will fight till the death for honor. And they do not want to dishonor their family or themselves by giving up. That's another thing to talk about too, is that the Japanese, when they took Americans that surrendered, they treated them poorly because it was not honorable to surrender. It was not honorable to give up. So they treated our prisoners terribly. And a lot of them died in captivity, but some of them actually were able to get free and come home. Here's a map of a lot of the wars in the Pacific Theater, or battles in the Pacific Theater, that the Allies fought against the Japanese. Here's a picture of the Iwo Jima Memorial in Washington, D.C. It shows Americans putting a flag in the ground, the American flag in the ground of Iwo Jima in Japan, and that is a memorial that you can go visit in Washington, D.C. Here are some pictures of the island hopping war. Americans, these islands, we firebombed them so that we could find the Japanese and take them on. And there is a picture of an aircraft carrier as well. Finally, the war in Europe ends here. VED, Victory in Europe Day, is May 7th, 1945. It happens a few days after Hitler's suicide and Mussolini's murder. Mussolini was taken by his people, dragged through the streets, and hung upside down to show people this is what will happen to you if you ever behave like this again. And then there, Hitler was in his bunker and committed suicide with his mistress Eva Braun, and the Russians or the Soviets came in there and they found his body and remains, and they took it away and hid it somewhere so that it would not be a place for people to be able to go and memorialize the death of Hitler. So after World War II ended in Europe, the Yalta Conference is going to take place. The Yalta Conference is where Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin are going to meet with a goal of figuring out how they're going to end this war and divide up Germany. Now, remember, after World War One, they screwed this up, and the Treaty of Versailles led to another war. So they didn't want this to happen again. So this was very, very important that they put together a really good plan to end this war. So in the end of war agreement, they decided to divide Germany up temporarily between Britain, France, the U.S., and the Soviet Union into four sectors. And we'll get into that more later. So it's going to be like split it into four, like a plus sign, and you're going to have your four different areas that are going to be looked over by four different countries. Stalin was going to oversee the new governments in Eastern Europe as well, as he wanted a buffer zone and some allies over there, so that he didn't get attacked ever again. So we'll cover that more when we get done with World War II. It's going to lead us into a Cold War. Victory in the Pacific for the United States wasn't as easy. Just because the war had ended in Europe didn't mean that this war was over. The United States began firebombing Japanese cities. So we were bringing some pain to a lot of people there and trying to get them, by burning down their cities, trying to get the Japanese to surrender. We did not want to have to bring in ground troops. Estimates were that 1 to 2 million Americans at minimum 1 to 2 million Americans at minimum would have died had we had to bring in ground forces to fight in Japan to win this war. So here's some pictures of the firebombing of Tokyo. As you can see, a lot of things are decimated by the fires. In April 1945, the longest serving American president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, passes away. And he brought the country out of a Great Depression, and he brought great leadership at a time where we needed great leadership to the country in World War II. Well, he dies here, uh, doesn't get to see the end outcome of the finality of the war here. A new U.S. president is going to come in. Vice President Harry Truman is going to take over, and he's got to make some of the toughest decisions that any man has ever had to make in the history of the world. He's going to decide that he's going to use the atomic bomb and drop it on Hiroshima on August 6th of 1945. When we bombed Hiroshima, 70,000 Japanese people were killed. We did not pick a military place. We did not pick Tokyo, which had millions of people. We picked a smaller city in hopes that they would want to give up right away. But The Japanese did not surrender after we used the first atomic bomb. So a few days later, we're going to use another atomic bomb on Nagasaki. As you can see on the map of Japan here are the two cities. Nagasaki is even a smaller town. And we threatened after we hit Nagasaki that we will continue to bomb Japanese cities until they surrender. So here's a picture of Nagasaki after the atomic bomb. No doubt about it, the atomic bomb does some destruction that you never want to see done. Most of the people who are within the bomb's radius are going to be died, and those just outside of the radius are going to get some radiation and die. And then if you're further out, you might not die, but you might get cancer from the radiation. So all in all, there's nothing good about the use of the A-bomb. That's why we've never seen it used again. So eventually, that bomb on Nagasaki was dropped on August the 8th, 1945. 40,000 more Japanese were killed because of that. Then the United States threatened Japan that on, on the 10th that we would be bombing Tokyo with our next bomb. And once they heard that we were going to bomb them and kill millions of people with an atomic bomb, the Japanese decided to surrender, and this became VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day. So August 10th, 1945, the Japanese officially surrendered. The great thing is that we threatened that we were going to use another nuclear bomb there, but we didn't even have another bomb. We had used both of ours, and all of the others were used in testing. So we didn't have one readily available yet. It would have took some time to get another one readily available. It was in the works, but it wasn't like an overnight type of thing. So at this point, too, the Soviet Union was not happy as well. They thought that we could have used that bomb to help them have less death in the theater war in Europe, and that we should have used it there. They didn't believe us that we didn't have this longer. We were just holding out to use it at a later time. So that's where we go from there. And that is all for day 3 of the PowerPoint. Mr. Glazer will pick up with you for day 4. Hope you guys are enjoying these PowerPoints that we're putting together for you on YouTube here, that you can follow along with your study guide and get this done. Obviously, I'd like to be there in class with you, but we can't at this time. So hopefully you're enjoying this and follow along your study guide. If you have any questions, again, you can always email us, or when you get done with the study guide, you're going to scan and send that to us. You can write these answers on a separate sheet of paper, scan, take a picture, send it to us, send it to our email, or upload it in Schoology. Plenty of options for you guys to get some work in and get some more learning in. So hopefully you have a great rest of the day. And again, it's a great day to be a Marauder. Go Marauders. And thanks for listening.